Happy Thursday, everybody. We've got quite a turnout. We were just gathering before the webinar started, and we're very excited to be here. Very glad to see the big turnout, and we have got a lot to discuss today. This is an important and insightful discussion. It's bound to leave us all thinking differently about our industry and where it's headed. So I've got a few questions teed up. We've got an hour. You'll notice a Q&A link in the Zoom below. We want folks to be interactive with us today. So if you've got a question that you'd like the panelists to answer, please enter it in. And if you are interested in upvoting that question to make sure it gets answered, please upvote that, and we will certainly get to them. I'd rather answer your questions than even the ones that I have, so I'm sure they'll be more insightful. But let's kick it off. A joint survey by Sureify and the Mantissa group. We examined and talked to a number of executives on the digital progress that is being made in life insurance. Even as technology is woven into the fabric of traditional companies, will it be enough to create cohesive departments while supporting modern agents and their needs? Sureify and Mantissa have these esteemed panelists to lead our discussion today and cover further findings from the report. This discussion will focus on defining digital transformation, how it affects insurers and their agents, and how we will revolutionize life products and how they will be bought and sold through technological developments. We'll also take a glimpse at how agents of the future will be equipped with improved access to real-time data, information across a wide variety of back-end systems. Ultimately, the advancements will improve agent and customer experiences. Finally, we'll investigate what opportunities and challenges lie ahead as insurers improve their footing in the digital world. I'll quickly introduce our panelists and we'll dive right in. First, we have Principal Product Manager and Industry Veteran in the agent space, Sherri Isaacson. Next, we have Industry CIO and CEO and founder of Mantissa Group, Desiderato. And rounding out our panel of experts is lifelong architect, technologist, and thought leader, Sureify's CTO, Ben Brantely.
Hey, nice to see everybody.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time today. I wanted to start our discussion by getting a feel for the landscape of where the industry is, how companies are assembling their priorities around the agent experience. So just looking at the industry report that your two firms put together, let's take a look at one data point that I found. 58% of respondents indicated that digital transformation is a top priority and a key business strategy. So Desiderato, can you spend a minute providing a rationale and an overview of the survey, how you define digital transformation?
Sure. Thank you for the question and for teeing it up. So I think probably the best way to do this is since you referred to some of the data, let me just first start by explaining the rationale and sort of the context for the survey that we did. So we sort of at Mantissa and Sureify and working with insurance companies have been asked over and over again to assist with core modernization and digital imperatives. And what we found is often the key to a digital strategy is to accelerate core modernization, which is typically sitting on really old and aging ecosystems and frankly, non-digital enabling technologies. So that was sort of the impetus behind sending it out. So with our colleagues at Sureify, our research group initiated the survey on the issue of both core modernization and digital strategies to write a report on the topic because we think those two topics are so interlinked, right? So let me answer. So to answer your question directly, my own simple view is in speaking to CIOs in the industry is that digital transformation is simply the strategic adoption of digital technologies. And it's being done so to advance either existing or brand new business models. Okay, that sounds like a simple definition, but it can get a little confusing. And what we've learned is it can get a little confusing because for some executives, it's about the technology. You know, for others, it's a new way of engaging with agents and customers. And for others still, it represents an entirely new way of doing business. So none of these perspectives are necessarily incorrect, but what we have found is that this diverse perspective on this topic will often trip up leadership teams because they reflect a little bit of a lack of alignment in a common vision about where the business needs to go. So we see that we've seen that aligning on a definition of digital will help to avoid missed opportunities, sluggish progress, and perhaps false starts. So finally, in insurance, which is what we're talking about right now, digital transformation we see is used to do a variety of things, including, you know, improving business processes, productivity, drive customer, and as we'll talk about in this webinar, agent experiences. And I think that's really what this is all about. So okay. So I'll leave it. I'll send it back to you.
I wanted to. That's great. Thank you. I did want to lean on Sherri Isaacson's background and experience in the agent space. So Sherri, is digital transformation different for agents as it is, say, for consumers?
Oh, I think it definitely is. You know, when I think about a consumer using a portal to get status, maybe on an application that's pending, or even to do an e-apply, I see them as using that portal maybe once, maybe a couple of times over the course of the lifetime of the policy, maybe during just key events. But an agent is, or should be anyway, in a portal almost daily. They should be focused on really not just status, which I think a lot of portals typically do. A lot of portals were really focused on how do we get the business into the carrier system to begin the underwriting, right? So let's give quoting tools, and let's give e-apply tools, and let's give status. But, you know, an agent, to be really effective with a carrier, it has to start way back at, can I sell a product? Do I know how to sell a product? Do I have all the training and licensing and appointments and all of those things in place just in order to get that client to the point where they can e-apply? And then even then we're asking, you know, the agents to do some of the e-apply process. Then once it gets into the funnel, we're pretty good at giving status to that agent, at least high level, but it's high level, you know, the paramed's still outstanding. It's very generic. We're not giving the agent a lot of tools of being proactive of what should I do? You know, maybe a carrier could offer that agent a little more hints on how to be proactive to kick that through. But the last point about, you know, especially data, giving data to an agent, it doesn't stop when that case goes in force, right? It continues all the way through servicing. And I think it's a disservice a little bit of where we've stopped in previous implementations of software in the past. We kind of, you know, we think we hit the goal line when we got that case in force. But now clients are running through, you know, divorces or children being born and college education and all these things where an agent could really be proactive in helping that client. And we're really not giving them visibility or the tool set. So if a client came to me and said, you know, Sherri, you're my agent, I need to change a beneficiary. It could be very much in the past, we gave, you know, I'd give the client the phone number to call the carrier and start that stuff. And I think the digital things that we need to focus on are some of the things really around that service and trying to make it that we can put that agent, you know, put their customer first so they can give, you know, the top of the line service. And so I think it's really, that's why the agent is it's just so much more robust than what the consumer is, because it's really soup to nuts. We've got to look at the whole process and figure out how we can get all of those tools to an agent.
So that's a great backdrop and a great setup for my next question. And I do want to pull Ben Brantely into this discussion. So the industry survey also noted that carriers are placing emphasis and priority on updating legacy backend systems. Carriers are placing emphasis on data strategies, and they see it directly as a success to digital transformation. So Ben, help us understand why these seemingly behind the scenes items are so critical. I mean, Sherri kind of teed it up for us, but if you can get into the next level down for us.
Yeah, it's a great question, almost a softball. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak. It is our ability as an industry to make the leap into full digitization is fundamentally and deeply constrained by the limitations of the underlying record-keeping systems that we all have and trust and sometimes love. But those systems generally were built in another time and place, far away, without a lot of consideration for digital work on the edge as a first-class consideration. And so one of the challenges that I think we all have struggled with, really probably for decades at this point, but are looking at very hard now, is how do we make new software that acknowledges and embraces and enfolds those systems? It's one thing to say, I'm going to modernize all of my legacy backends in order to promote a digital future. That's really good and important, but that's also a monumental journey. And while I think most carriers are on that journey to one degree or another, we don't have time to wait for those systems to make it to some next gen panacea. We need to act now on digital. And so a lot of our focus here at Sureify has been on figuring out how best to do that. How do we coexist in frame and wrap around those systems and their strengths, but also their limitations, and find the best of both worlds, find a path to digital that we can achieve today, rather than waiting for some theoretical future that, could be years and years from now. And so I would say, finding some balance there is probably the pragmatic approach that's going to make sense for most carriers.
Okay, you certainly describe a lot of heavy lifting still, right? So if I go back to you, Sherri, you talk about the desire to go beyond enforce. You've got all of this heavy lifting that Ben described. Is it, let's pause and let's have the back end systems catch up, or is there the ability to pursue a digital strategy while all of this back end type of work is being done, this data strategy work is being planned?
I really think what we need to do is think about how we can meet carriers exactly where they are. They're big ships. Some of these ships have been around for 100 years, right? They've got a lot of systems, a lot of processes in place already. And we don't want to break anything while we try to integrate this new technology or work on improving things. And if I could pick something like service as an example, we could provide an incredible experience to the client, maybe it's not completely automated in the back end, but the client doesn't necessarily need to know that. So we can start with existing processes. Maybe it is truly paper, but give those tools a front end to the client where it looks like it's 24/7 and very digital, but we slowly introduce, maybe we start with paper transmissions back and forth, but securely and get it to the right hands at the carrier. And then as the carrier gets prepared, and it could be system 1 versus system 2 versus system 3, that we could then begin the automation. How can we take that what used to be a paper process and can continue to be, And all of a sudden it transitions from paper to digital, but the client doesn't necessarily have to see much difference, right? We can kind of hide it a little bit from the client while we get all our ducks in a row in the back ends with the carriers. And then it just simply starts to improve, and we improve on the process moving forward.
Okay, well, that's certainly an approach, and probably one in force today, right? Hey, Don, same question. Do you see companies running all of this work in parallel?
Yeah, I was listening to both Ben and Sherri talk about this, and I think we're all essentially trying to say something similar things. And I think my answer is absolutely. And not only is it absolutely possible with, really good technologists behind the scenes, it is time is of the essence, right? Because consumers are not interested in waiting, and agents are not interested in waiting. It has to happen, right? So when I think about this problem, right, I think about the planning and the sequencing for how this all works. So it's possible to do a digital strategy while updating the back-end systems. However, it really does have to be planned and sequenced and purposeful. Otherwise, there can be all kinds of mishaps along the way. A really interesting data point, it just screamed at me, Tony, when I saw this. One of the questions posed to the CIOs is, what technologies are the most critical to your company's success in the next 3 years? Well, 79% of the survey respondents point to data enablement as a top priority. Probably one of the more critical, and equally complex enablers of digital, which is data. And why is it so complex? To Ben's point, I think earlier, the data ecosystem that sits out there today, and I use this language very specifically, it's not 30 or 40 years old. It was built over 30 or 40 years, encompassing many technologies and many things. So your data is not in a great condition to really enable your digital priorities. So that's why an overwhelming majority of the survey respondents, it's like the number one response was pointing to data enablement, right? So my final, I think, point for this particular question is business leaders need to engage, right? Because with the right engagement by business leaders in the implementation of these enabling technologies, we have to put together an actionable, business-driven, multi-year roadmap with delivery along the way to advance the digital journey, and at the same time advance your core modernization problem. So it's a very complex, but it's very doable. And regardless, time is of the essence, and it has to happen.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So all of that highly complex, high wire act in the background, digging a level deeper into the digital agent experience specifically. What are some of the key business capabilities that are yet to be unlocked? And Sherri, you touched on a couple of them, but if we can maybe even go a level deeper, maybe throw it back to you for a little more detail, Sherri.
When I look, and I've been in the industry for quite a few years, and primarily in the distribution area, and distribution really, was fine tuning that whole process of pending case and in-force and that whole workflow stream. When I look at just an agent and a carrier, with the carrier being our primary focus, I started to think, now, what are the pain points that I've seen in the past at the carrier level that seem to go unnoticed? And one of the things I think is, the onboarding of an agent and the letting that agent do a little bit of self-service even themselves. So onboarding the agent, making sure the licenses are up to date and the contracts and the product training and all of those things. How can we be better at taking it down to the agent level before the agent actually wants to sell a piece of business, right? Because it's easy to catch it when it's in the underwriting stream and it gets to the carrier and it's like, wait a minute, Sherri doesn't have the proper license in Missouri, and now I've got to go and rush around and get things done. How can we put some of those onboarding tools to the agent and keep them up to date where they are long before they ever decide to sell a piece of business? So that was the one side. And then the other side, especially when I look at an agent, because again, on the client, on the customer side, we've got some tools coming out in the market that are very customer engagement. It's like sending information down to that customer, and it may start with, track your steps and get your goals, and which, by the way, I love that, because within Sureify, there's like a leaderboard, and I'm very focused on making sure that Ben doesn't get more points donated to charity this month than I do. But how do we do the same thing, not just to the customers, but now to the agents? Because if I could have, my wish, it would be that every morning an agent is picking up that phone and hitting a Sureify app to see, what's my pipeline, what's my commissions, what's, whatever those things are. And even recognizing that an agent does business across multiple carriers, and they're working with distribution partners, and they've got assistants, and they've got all these people. How can we get that agent engaged? How can we get the agent focused, not just on going out and making the sale, but everything about their business, even if it is in the middle of the night and they pick up their phone and they hit the button just to see it, get that engagement. So it's the front end of onboarding, and it's the back end of really agent engagement.
Great. Thank you. Ben or Don, care to throw any detail? I mean, we've got the agent expert who just answered the question, but
it's I can't help but pile on. I mean, I think there are so many, on a number of different levels. There's a lot of capability, even basic capability, that I think at most carriers looks like it's still to be unlocked. For example, just providing a coherent view across the total book of business that encodes the relationship between a particular agent or agency and that carrier. That's a question that technically is quite hard for the systems at carriers to answer in real time today. And so that goes back to the data coherence challenge that Don was talking about earlier. That's a pretty table stakes capability. You need to be able to see a relationship in detail. Sherri touched on statusing and granularity of view into process. That's both pre and post issue. I think we have a long way to go on that front in terms of bringing together in one spot a precise look into the state of all of those transactions and the flows that undergird them. And so building some standards and putting some formal software process around that is a big step that we all need to take together. And then a natural follow-on from that is, well, once we have a computer that does understand how those processes are moving, well, then we need to turn around and express that in a system neutral way. And that generally is going to mean a modern API or set of APIs. And when we do that, well, that lets agents, advisors, distribution, and consumers come to the data and the process on their own technical terms. It lets us build web apps and native experiences and asynchronous communication. Maybe you want to get a digest email with updates. Maybe you want push notifications for certain things to your phone, but not for others. The ability to control, to allow the people out on the edge to control how they engage with the data and process and do it on their own terms is table stakes. It's what people expect in other parts of their lives. And there's no reason that we can't do the same thing in life insurance and annuity. And so those would be the basic things that I think we really need to work on in the next few years to kind of just get to that first level of completeness. And then ask me later about the advanced stuff. But once those things are in place, I think then there's a lot of option space that opens up for fancier things, for more analysis, for more opportunity for the system to help people be proactive. But first, we need to be able to see and look at and cohere over all the information that we already have. And that's a serious, meaningful, substantial undertaking in itself.
Great. That's a great ad. Thank you. Don, did you have anything?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to run the risk of piling on a little bit, but I just want to come at it from just a different angle. Different angle. So when I was preparing for this discussion today, I was looking at the survey result. This is not today, but in advance of this, and there was one question that really just really stood out to me, right? So, and the question was, what technologies are the most critical to your company's success over the next 3 years? This is all of the people on the phone today or on the webinar today. This is people like that were responding to the survey. 84% of the survey respondents pointed to investment in the agent experience. It's almost unanimous as the highest, and it was the highest on the list. So I became curious and I interviewed an agent. And so I called her up and I said, you know, I'm thinking about what this might mean. So what are the capabilities that you would like unlocked? And her answer to me was all of them, right? And I laughed, and she says, you know, she says, think of my life as an agent in the digital world. And she goes, I need a single pane of glass, and I need the single pane of glass to tell me everything from classic CRM, prospecting leads, lead managements, you know, renewals, commissions, revenue projections, to the point, Sherri's point earlier, licensing appointments, all of these sales enablement tools. You know, tell me what my next best action when one of my clients has just bought a house or had a child. You know, I'm required to do training. You know, so this education is so important. Not only training on product, but compliance. To Sherri's point earlier, agent onboarding, recruiting, and then there's the whole point of sale. You know, illustrations to illustrate possibilities, EAP. You know, and then there's transactional capabilities that they do on behalf of their clients. And she said, all of these are the things that I need available. So I can't pick one. I want them all. And she goes, by the way, I have a Tesla. And when I'm going from point A to point B, I'd like it to integrate with my technology in my car so I could understand what to do next, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the mentality and the mindset that, you know, agents have, which is why time is of the essence, right? And I just wanted to share that story because it's such a substantive one, and it's a little sobering, you know.
Yeah, so, it certainly touches on Sherri's earlier point about next best action, right?
And next best action, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, we are already halfway through. I want to shift a little bit, but I do want to remind folks that we have the Q&A link below. So please enter your questions and upvote them if you want them answered, and we'll certainly pivot to those. So please do that. We must be doing a great job, though. You guys certainly are. I'm just throwing these questions out there, but let's pivot over a little bit to the consumer side. So Sherri, if you can, you know, take us forward here. You earlier talked about the differences between the agent and the consumer experiences, but let's shift over to the consumer. What is that experience of the future? What are the key challenges that, you know, he or she will be trying to solve?
You know, I really think about when I got life insurance, and here a gentleman came that I had never met before, and he's sitting there with me and asking me all of these questions, right? And it's like, I don't even know him. I think he may know more about me after this application process is done than my husband does. And I look at the application process, especially as, you know, our base, the people that need insurance should be younger, a little bit younger generation. You know, you've got the older generation with a lot of money, and they already have been down the insurance route. What I would love to see in the future is some way to allow collaboration between all levels, you know, all levels, carrier, distribution, agent, and consumer. and allow the consumer to do as much as that consumer wants to do. So if it's completely a term case that's super easy, direct to consumer fits the bill, right? I can do the whole thing. I get my term insurance. But then, you know, as that person starts getting into different medical conditions and, you know, starts getting into the gray area of index universal life and whole life and what's the difference, have that agent there to lead, to be the guiding force for that client, but also still share that application process so nobody ever has to go through what I did, which is, you know what, if I don't want you to know or at least I don't want to say it out loud, send me the link to that app. I'll do my part. I'll send it back to you. You do your part. Let's make sure everything works. But then as a consumer, keep me in the loop and tell me what I'm missing. You know, if I forgot to, make the paramed appointment or send in a particular form, make sure that I, as a consumer, just know, you know, your next step is to do this. And if you do this, we're looking at an approval. So I think that the consumer, it's going to be more collaborative and more information is better versus off goes the application. You sit and wait. And then maybe, you know, 6 months later, or not really 6 months, how about 6 weeks later, you get an app or a policy in your hand. I think there's a lot more that we can do just to engage that consumer right from the get-go. And then once we have the consumer kind of engaged during the application process, that makes engagement in the future all that much, you know, smoother. And so now they've got a tool, or they've got at least a contact of that agent where they can go to for, I just got married, I need to change my last name. And they've got a more, they feel more connected, I guess is what I'm going to say, more connected.
Okay, great. Ben, what have you been seeing in the marketplace? What are some of those challenges that are
I just want
ahead?
to say, why does Sherri always get to go first? She gets to take all the good one. I'll echo and layer on to some of what she said. I think as an industry in the past few years in particular, we've proven that we can bring straight through digital process, even for some fairly complex underwritten products in a direct to consumer world. But the reality is, for most of our market, for most of our base, for most of the future reality, those folks are going to be working with agents. And we have to build our systems and design our experiences in full embrace of that reality. So how do we make multi-persona experience that lets each of those humans come to the process at the level that they're ready to? And if that means sometimes we print out a piece of paper and gather a wet signature, but then quickly wrap that back into a digital process behind the scenes, great. In other cases, if somebody's capable of e-signing on their phone, let's do that. But it's not going to be the same for every person. And we need to be able to have a set of tiered, approachable, practical ways for different levels of technical appetite to come to the table electronically. And so embracing that, I think, is a big deal. One thing that's really nice is that all the stuff we were talking about a few minutes ago for agents also are the same building blocks we need to deliver experience and visibility and fine-grained status and alert to those consumers. Technology is the same underneath. And so we definitely want to make that investment one time the right way, and then lever that out to the different constituencies. The computer doesn't really care if it's an agent or someone in the home office or underwriting or a consumer. We can send the same types of process and build a process that wraps over all of those humans. And so I think that's probably, you know, from a transactional experience point of view, I think that's probably where we have the lowest hanging fruit, as it were, the places to really make the biggest change in the coming few years. But then I think as that investment is laid in place, it starts to pay off on a longer time scale. Those folks, those consumers who are now engaged electronically, as Sherri mentioned, can be lofted into an ongoing electronic relationship and a web and or native experience that they can trust and come back to. And that provides another channel and another opportunity for distribution for agents to take advantage of. And so we really want to we want to have our cake and eat it too in that area, I think.
Great. Don, you're last again. Are you going to yell at me?
No, that's right.
No, okay.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm really supporting you. I think, listen, I think I echo a lot of the sentiment, but I do want to bring up another point. So I think the consumer or customer experience of the future in its most simplest way is about access and ease, right? Access to information, ease, whatever they want, whenever they want. And they're the ones, and that's sort of what this is all about. The capabilities we've already talked about, but it's really, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that is the customer experience of the future isn't about delivering like a one-off customer journey, right? And it's not about sort of digitizing a one-off journey. It's about implementing sort of a cyclical dynamic. And what's interesting about the cyclical dynamic is that the customer is now driving the agenda. So they're the ones that are driving the agenda. They're the ones that are driving the process, right? So it's about implementing this cyclical dynamic where processes and capabilities are constantly evolving based on inputs from the customer. So using Sherri's example, customers are basically saying, look, you're not coming to my house, first of all, and you're not sticking a needle in my arm. You're going to find another way to underwrite me. And that is driving the whole usage of digital health records. When there's life changes that are happening, then the customer's in the driver's seat, or financial circumstances change. Yeah. The customers are in the driver's seat. They have different needs, and sort of they drive the dialogue, right? So I think it's the whole dynamic is now flipped, where the customer is in charge. And gone are the days where somebody is sort of charting the customer journey on behalf of the customer. That's just not happening anymore. So I think that's the one other comment that I wanted to make, in that I've seen over and over again through our clients that the customer and consumer is driving what the priorities are based on what they are willing to do. And I just figured I'd wrap up with that one point.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. I do want to kind of pull all of these threads together. And Ben Brantely, you're in luck. You're going to go first this time. We know this industry is well known for having a lack of standardization, right, in terms of data exchange across partners and customers. With everything we just described and what we're striving towards here, do you see that trend going away? Are there examples that you can share of that tide turning or that shift even happening?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Standardization is always hard, especially when all the parties are not completely economically aligned with each other. And that's true in our competitive multi world, where we have multiple carriers servicing multiple distributors servicing the consumers. There will always be some inherent tension there. I do think there is an opportunity for us to take the next standardization steps, though, as an industry, particularly around encoding some of the meta process and statusing and other basic, what we talked about earlier would be table stakes information about status and process and progress. I think there's an opportunity to bring in some lightweight standards on top of the heavy, the TC103s and Accord XML specs that drive the underlying data push. Well, those tend to be very data oriented rather than process oriented. And so where we have probably the vanguard of opportunity for standardization is as an industry to say, hey, we also want to communicate about status. How do we do that cleanly, but in a way that doesn't lock any one party into a specific structured format, but simply gives them a flexible, open, but consistent way to message back and forth to each other. And there's a little bit of cart before the horse there. It has to be true that systems are in place that can consume and take advantage of those messages. and that systems can generate those types of events before there's going to be a lot of motivation to encode those as standards. But I do think we're at that tipping point where it's time to really sit down and start to hammer some of those things out. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I think there's an opportunity right now to start to make that change. And then I think we would see tons of vendors and providers and integrators and carriers and agents and distributors who would all happily jump on that train and share information back and forth, because it's to the good of all of us that we dramatically change the way that happens and stop having to pick up the phone or get handwritten notes about what's going on. It's just such an obvious opportunity.
All right, great. Don Desiderato, you have anything to add?
No, I just think that was a mic drop moment with Ben. I think he really sort of encapsulated my thinking as well, and I'm going to let it stand on its own. I just think that the time is right, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Good thing you got to go first, Ben. There you go. Took it all. Sherri,
Well,
any thoughts there?
I am going to just put in a thought.
All right.
The Accord standard is it was an incredible start to being able to feed, especially to a distribution partner, status from many carriers. And the only drawback with all of that was that the carriers weren't standardized. And so, you can only take it so far, and until the carriers get standardized, that standard is only going to be as good as it can possibly be, and it is big and bulky, and it takes a lot of work to get changes put in place and versioning and so forth, but it definitely serves a purpose, as did all of the other standards that came out with things like licensing and contracting and commissions and so forth. But the biggest problem with all of those standards, the standards exist, but the carriers just didn't have the capacity to support them, or didn't know how it would fit, to Ben's point, into their workflow if they were receiving data. And so the standards have their place, and I can't wait to see what the future is going to be like if we can somehow again get those things to slim down a little bit and be able to really tie the standards into workflows within a carrier to really bring out the strength of what was started for us so many years ago.
Right. Well, it sounds like we're hopefully at that tipping point. So that would be an exciting development for sure. I know other industries have had compelling events, things of that nature to move folks along. So we'll see how that unfolds. Let's stick to technology a little bit more. We've talked about APIs on and off over the last 45 minutes. Can we talk about the importance of APIs as a key design principle, maybe with respect to helping along standardization? So Ben, if you want to kick us off again.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely my bailiwick. You say API and I smile. APIs are our engineering way of defining boundaries between things. And when we define boundaries well, then we break a big problem down into smaller ones. And that's how, as humans, we work on really big problems. We decompose them into littler pieces and work on them individually. Particularly in the digital agent and consumer space, because many of the people that are going to be involved with this software are outside the walls of the carrier, APIs become exponentially more important. We need to be able to publicize, defend, and deliver a set of capabilities, both data and compute, over a set of consumable, readily accessible, clearly documented, and well-defended set of logic that you can invoke. And so APIs have to be at the heart of the design of any modern digital experience software or engine or capability. And that wasn't necessarily true for the record-keeping systems that we depend upon, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So in the new world, as it were, it's even more important that the interstitial technologies, the systems that are going to support these digital experiences for decades to come, simply are built from the ground up to express everything underneath as an API. And that opens up options. It allows carriers, distributors, agents, and consumers alike to have more choice in how they interact and how the systems plug together. And it allows us to defend against an uncertain future in a much better way. By creating things in smaller blocks with more APIs, we can flex and replug those things together in new ways next year or next decade, maybe some that we didn't even anticipate today, without having to go back, retrench, and dig up all that plumbing and rebuild it yet again. And so setting the stage today is paramount. We have to do that well. And it's probably actually more important that our APIs get stable and really good than that any underlying implementation of them is flawless, because those boundaries are how we will know our neighbors. And we got a lot of neighbors in the agent and distribution space.
Right, right. So Sherri, if I can kind of tailor that question a little bit more as to, what's the uptake to the business, when they hear API? Is that something that resonates with your customers at a business level yet? Is it yet another promised land to be seen, or what's the take there?
I might have to phone a friend, Ben. When people hear API, they typically think point to point, just like one-to-one. And I think it's getting people to think outside of kind of that box, and myself included. APIs were kind of a new thing when I joined Sureify, and I'm still trying to wrap my arms around it. But everybody knows what an API is when somebody says an API, but I don't know if they really know what an API is, like the underlying, the technology and how it all works, and all of the magic that lies underneath it.
Sounds like it would be another great webinar topic, though.
I think so.
You read my mind. I agree. We certainly want to continue this series, so that could be a good one. Don, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. I wanted to talk about this a little bit, and I think Ben used the language. It's the heart of the design, right? I think recognizing when we did the survey, we recognized that core modernization and digital modernization are sort of two universally linked things, or they're two linked things, right? And data and then APIs or services are the things that are major enablers for both of these, digital transformation and core modernization. We as technologists need to be really good at explaining the value proposition of this, because there's not an inherent value in the delivery of really, really hardcore APIs, but there's such an enabler, and it's such a critical path item that we have to get very, very good at really describing the importance and prominence of both data and services. And I think that is a key element that a lot of CIOs that I know are trying to figure out how to do. So
yeah, and from what we just described, it sounds almost like a path to further standardization or flexibility.
It kind of is, right? It is.
All right. Well, we've got 11 minutes left, and like I said, you guys are doing such a bang up job. We have yet to see any Q&A in the discussion board, so we're just going to keep rolling with what I've got here. I would just look to the audience right now. Panelists, there's a number of industry leaders on this webinar, executives, people who are in front of clients on a day-to-day basis. They've taken the time to be here with us today. They'll be watching the recording in the future. What are some of the warnings or opportunities that you'd like them to know right now? So, Don Desiderato, why don't you kick us off?
Let me go first. Okay.
Sure.
So warnings and opportunities. So I think this is an important question, right? So when we're sitting in front of clients, talking about this particular topic, we always point to two very specific things. Number one is developing that multi-year roadmap, which is both a warning and an opportunity, right? That multi-year roadmap. And the reason we do is because, with the exception of greenfield situations where there's nothing else existing but pure greenfield, we have yet to see a sound digital strategy executed without a multi-year roadmap to govern this evolution. The roadmap is the thing that creates the language between the technologists and the business that is being supported. It includes a comprehensive phased approach. It discusses the concepts of reusing and retiring and replacing, architecture decisions, things of that nature. And we have personally seen huge failures for those who've attempted their strategies without a roadmap. Some positive news. The survey showed that 53% of the survey respondents indicated that more work is needed on developing this multi-year roadmap, right? So people recognize it, which is the positive, but what we also recognize is half of them don't, right? So I think that's the first one. The second one we haven't talked about yet, and that is security matters, right? So software vendors and insurance companies have to focus on security, particularly in a digital world, right? It's paramount. Back to the survey, 58% of the respondents agreed and they believe they have an effective security strategy in place, which means it's on the agenda, right? So we think that that's good. 84% of the same respondents felt comfortable with their overall security posture. We could never take our eye off the ball on security. Everything needs to be looked at through a security lens. So if there's two things that I'd like to point to, it would be that multi-year strategy and then focus on security.
All right, great. Ben Brantely, same question. Warnings, opportunities.
Mine is both, all wrapped up in one.
All right.
There are a lot of natural processes where we see nonlinear dynamics. Nothing happens for a while, then all these thunderclouds build all at once in the afternoon, and then there's a big storm. Lots of other things like that. Life insurance has a lot of inertia as a business. That cuts both ways. It changes slowly. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes there's reasons for that. But if it behaves the way some of our sibling industries have in the past few years, we are likely approaching a tipping point where a few carriers are really going to close the loop in the years to come. They are going to fully digitize their stack. They're going to be able to express all the data in a coherent way over a set of APIs to all the consumers that need them. And they're going to be able to process business electronically or in a hybrid mode as everyone wishes when they come to the table. And that offering, that package offering, is going to give them, those carriers, a structural advantage over their peers who may still be doing things the old way. And there will come a time where there will likely be a big shift, and that it doesn't even have to be very many percentage points for it to be big in insurance. And so the sort of warning / opportunity that I would lay out is that the time to get serious about this is now. We have to start now. It's a long process, and frankly, you all have been underserved by some of your software vendors, and we as software companies need to step up to the plate, embrace this problem wholeheartedly and first class, and partner with you to make those things happen. We have immense opportunity to do that, and we have the technology available today to do that in a reasonable, stepwise way. But we must start, and the ones who do are more likely to be the haves, and the ones who delay are going to find themselves probably out of position, and in some cases, because of the time and latency involved, sort of structurally out of position for the long run. And so that's not to say I love those thunderstorms and the rain is a blessing, but those clouds are coming in, and so It's time to prepare today.
Yeah, great, thank you. Sherri Isaacson, final thoughts. warnings on opportunities.
You know, I think I'm going to go off the menu and not do a warning or an opportunity.
All
But,
right.
and simply say to the carriers out there in particular, you've done a lot of stuff over the years and none of it's been wrong. You know what I mean? It's hard to chase a lot of different distribution methods and the next shiny object, you know, the direct to consumer and, you know, now engagement, and it's all these things as technology grows. And so it's not about necessarily saying you've got to take everything that you've done to this point and just throw it off to the side. It's not that at all. All of those things are good things and they have their place, but now it's time that we kind of wrap all around it and frankly, put the carrier back in focus too, saying, what is going to be best for you? What's going to be best for you to make that agent or the consumer or the distributor? What's going to be best for you to make those customers come to you, make it easy to do business with you, make it seamless to do business with you, and get that business in your door versus the company that may not be embracing some of these new technologies. So I just want to say, you've done great. You're still here. Let's take it to the next level.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Well, you know, we do have a couple Q&As, but we are out of time. So we will endeavor to answer those questions offline because I think there are a couple important, 3 important questions. So we will look to answer those offline. I really enjoyed this. I want to thank our panelists, Sherri Isaacson, Ben Brantely, and Don Desiderato. You've left us all with a lot to think about, a lot of exciting work in front of us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, and there are other insightful conclusions captured in the Sureify Mantissa survey. Please download a copy of it off of either the Sureify or the Mantissa website. This is hopefully the first in a long series of industry webinars that I'll be bringing to you. Someone commented to me offline that I failed to introduce myself. I'm Tony Sainegh. I'm with the Mantissa Group. It's been a pleasure moderating this event. Stay tuned to our next event, and we'll be posting that online. And really, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.